English 201, week 5, part 6. Um, this next part of the story, I really feel like this gets especially interesting. And this is the kind of thing I think often that maybe would get cut if you were looking for places to cut, but I actually think this is really centrally important to what we're doing here. Let's take a look. Bottom of page 9. Despite all the misfortune, there was, despite all the misfortune, Despite all their misfortune, there was still some money available from the old days. It was not a lot, but it had not been touched in the meantime, and some interest had accumulated. Besides that, they had not been using up all the money that Gregor had been bringing home every month, keeping only a little for himself, so that too had been accumulating. Behind the door, Gregor nodded with enthusiasm in his pleasure at this unexpected thrift and caution. He could actually have used this surplus money to reduce his father's debt to his boss, and the day when he could have freed himself from that job would have come much closer, but now it was certainly better the way his father had done things. Irony. That is a big moment of irony. What contrasts with what? Gregor's response to this situation is the opposite of my response to the situation. Gregor is so pleased that his family he's been giving them money every month, and his family, he thought they were spending it all. Turns out they were saving some. Good. Also, Gregor was under the impression that the father had lost all of his money from the business. Turned out he didn't lose it all. He had a little left over. So he's got two different kinds of savings. He's got savings from the old days when the father ran the business, and he's been saving from Gregor's money. And Gregor is so appreciative. He says because he was a provider, and now he can't go to work, and now he finds out his father has actually been saving money. Isn't that thrifty? Isn't that responsible of his father to have saved up all this money so that they don't so that they saved up all this money to make their lives easier. And Gregor's relieved because he was thinking, oh man, I used to going to work was how I paid for this family, but now they've saved some of the money and they can live off of that for a little while. And he's pleased. He says it's so much better the way his father had done it. But ooh boy, the detail work there. He's happy with this, but he says he could actually have used the surplus money to reduce his father's debt to his boss, and the day when he could have freed himself from that job would have been much closer. But now it was certainly better the way his father had done things. Like, Gregor hates his job. The only reason he's going to the job is to make money for his family. If his family has a bunch of extra money, they should be using that to pay off the father's debt so that Gregor can stop working this fucking job. And in fact, it's going to turn out that they have enough to live on for like a year or two. And Gregor was saying, oh, all I have to do is work this job for like 5 more years. Well, Jesus Christ, if they had told him about the money they socked away, he only would have had to work that job for 3 more years, not 5. Can you imagine if you thought you had to work at a job you hated for 5 years and then it turned out you didn't have to? You could have done it in 3 instead of 5. You'd be furious. Gregor's whole life is right. What does he do in his free time? He looks up train timetables and cuts pictures of girls out of magazines and puts them in a frame because he has no fucking friends. He has no one to love, and he could get away from that life. So it's ironic because Gregor's like, oh, it was probably better the way his father had done things. He's so relieved that his parents were taking care of money things and they had a little money saved away. But I'm not relieved. I'm angry on his behalf. I'm having the opposite reaction. It makes him love his family for being cautious. It makes me hate them because they could have used that money to pay off his father's debts, and then Gregor wouldn't have to work at a job he hates for so many years. Literally, he get 2 years less at that horrible fucking job, and his family could have gotten him out of that job earlier, and they never said anything. They were perfectly happy for him to work there for 2 years for no fucking reason. Yeah. Oh, actually, the line about how many years the money would last is actually right at the bottom of that page. It was enough to maintain them for perhaps 1 or 2 years. So, like, it doesn't seem like that's a pretty significant amount of money that the whole family can live off of it for 2 years. It's a large percentage, 2/5. It's like 2/5 of the time Gregor was going to have to go to work. It's how they treat him. It just makes me so crazy. I don't know how your family treats you, but like this is my family treats me very nicely. But it just I have a lot of queer friends whose families treat them like dirt because they're queer. And so that's one of the things I think about a lot with the story. And of course, most people I know hate their jobs. They hate them. I'm actually the only person I know that loves my job. I really enjoy hanging out. I mean, you can see how excited I am. I'm having a good time. I love this job because to me, this job's very good for me. I have a good job. It's a hard job to get. There's not very many of them going around, and there's less and less of this kind of professor gig. It's hard to get them. Did I get it because I'm a genius? A lot of it was fucking luck. Um, but the but I like my job. But everybody I know hates their jobs, and so this story I think really speaks to a lot of those people that I hear talking about how much they hate their jobs. Um, okay, cool. I do think teaching is a great job, although it's hard to find one that sort of pays enough and is secure enough. But being a teacher is a great job. Being a college professor has some problems, and if you're interested in that, I'll be happy to talk to you about that sort of career angle. It's a There's some tricky shit in with being a college professor, but being a teacher, I think, is a fucking great job. I love it because you get to hang out with young people, which is really nice. And well, what was my job? I can't be fired, and I only work 8 months out of the year. And normally and I guess I have to do class planning, but I have to do some research and shit. But anyway, it's a pretty good job, and I get to what I do. I make videos about my favorite books, and they pay me. It's great. Okay. Um, oh, sorry. What am I doing next? So Gregor. Uh, Next up, we find a little bit about. Anyway, that's sort of the crucial middle part of the story. We're going to hear a little bit more about what's happening to Gregor's body and his life in here. Um, he used to feel a great. Sometimes he would stare out of the window. Doing it now was obviously something more remembered than experienced, as what he saw in this way was becoming less distinct every day, even things that were quite near. So, like, one of the things we learn about Gregor is his eyesight is failing. Um, he says he would have thought he was looking out of the window at a barren waste where the gray sky and gray earth mingled inseparably. This is the kind of detail I want to draw your attention to. It's a metaphor. When Gregor looks out of the window and he sees a barren waste, that's the kind of thing that students do not like to think of as a metaphor. They tend to be like, the guy that wrote the story is telling me what it looks like out the window. It's true, he is. It's just he can't see anything out the window. But it's like a metaphor. When a character sees a barren waste, it's a way of communicating to you, the reader. It's a metaphor for how he feels inside. You all know this. The most dramatic type of weather is like a massive storm. Notice that in movies, when they put a massive storm, it's often for the most dramatic part of the movie. Because the weather, dramatic storm, is a metaphor for what's happening to the characters. Major drama. Here, Gregor is in a bleak and terrible situation with his family, and so what he sees outside is bleak and terrible. Now, obviously, you're going to be like, well, Gregor's eyes are failing, and the reason why it seems blank and barren is because he can't. It's the reason why it seems blank and barren is because the window is not in a good spot and there's fog. And yes, if you are living in the world of the story, that is the answer. If you're standing next to Gregor and you're like, yeah, I can't see anything out of this window either, it's real foggy, you got to clean it. But as the person reading the story, the reason Kafka says it's barren, Gregor just sees barren wasteland out there, it's because he feels barren in his relationship with his family, right? It's a depressing view out the window because he feels depressed in here. Just like in an action movie, big storm, big dramatic weather is a metaphor for the big dramatic changes happening to the characters' lives in the movie. I spent a little too much time with that, but I didn't. I think that's a really useful thing to know. I think that's the kind of metaphor that often people go, well, whatever, it was just raining. Because in real life, you'd be like, I don't know, it was just raining that day. But in a story, if they mention the rain, it's a metaphor, right? Because people go, well, it's just a coincidence. Well, it's not a coincidence that he mentioned it, right? Um, yeah. Okay. Cool. Actually, I was reading you guys know Henry David Thoreau? He wrote a really famous book about America, and it's like a diary. And so he starts off, it's like July 4th, and the teacher the teacher that was explaining it to the class I was in was saying, see, July 4th, it's like America's birthday because this whole book is a metaphor for America. And the student was like, well, wait a minute, that just happens to be the day that he started. Like, he could have started any day. He just happened to begin that day. It's not a metaphor. It's just that he's literally just writing the date down. And the teacher was like, yeah, maybe it's a coincidence that that's the day, but it's not a coincidence that he mentioned it. So it must be important. And that's how you end up in metaphorical stuff. I'll see you guys in the next video.